to My Tiny Bottles, the project where I'm exploring my grandmother's legacy of miniature liquor bottles, one tiny bottle at a time. I'm your host, Tammy Coxon, and I'm here at Amor y Amargo with Sother Teague.
Hey.
Thank you so much, Sother, for letting us use your bar for this recording. So I know you as one of the hosts of the Speakeasy podcast.
Yep.
I know you are an author and a owner of many bars, as they rib you about on the podcast all the time.
Constant ribbing from the boys, yes,
Absolutely.
about my penchant for opening businesses constantly, which is what I do. Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to be a part of this, but you recorded a couple of other episodes here that will air.
Good. Yes.
Love having you in the space.
Thank you so much. This is great. So you were not very demanding. Some of my guests are like, "Oh, I want to taste this bottle." You were like, "Yeah, give me anything."
I am a gambler, which may explain why I open so many businesses. I'm willing to take what comes my way. So if you've only got 300 bottles, I'm certain that the quote unquote nicer ones are getting picked away at. I'll take what you got.
I was waiting. I was like, I'm going to ask Sother to be on, but I got to find a nice bitter thing for him. I got to find it tomorrow. I haven't found one yet. So I'll come back when I do.
So you slowly are going through the box yourself.
That's right. I don't know the reveal. What they are. No, I just pick a few bottles at a time and guess what I can about them based on the label. But for me, the fun of this is the discovery. So,
I love it.
Yeah. Well, so what I have for you today is Jack Daniel's.
Close friends call him John. Yes.
All right. Nice. So this one, you'll notice is a little bit dusty, except I think that's actually mold.
Okay.
It was definitely
this happens.
The paper that it was wrapped in definitely looked like it had some mold on it, but it looks pretty good inside.
Sure.
So I think it'll still be tasty.
Still got the tax seal on there. That's a good
sign.
Still
has the tax seal. So this is 82 to 85. I think based on the bottle embossing, 82.
Sure.
And
cool.
So one of the interesting things about this one is that it is bottled at a higher proof. So this is when they were bottling at 45% ABV or 90 proof, whereas the modern one is only 80 proof.
And the modern one's in plastic too.
Modern one's in plastic. And
how far we've come.
As regular viewers of My Tiny Bottles will know, the plastic bottles do not stand up, right? So this bottle is like 40 years old. This bottle will not make 40 years old.
Oh, no way.
It'll be half empty, as most of my plastic bottles are. So I'm glad this one was in glass. Good shoulder there. What's your history with Jack Daniel's?
Believe it or not, this was the most common whiskey in my household all my growing up.
Oh, wow.
My dad was a dyed-in-the-wool Jack Daniel's enthusiast.
Okay.
In fact, and see, this is what I love. You chose this bottle for me out of the blue. This is a blind. We're going at this raw. We haven't rehearsed anything. In fact, they release each year a commemorative bottle, right, which is a different shaped bottle. And you can, upon purchasing that bottle, you can then send in a certificate and they'll send you back a 16 karat gold, why 16, I don't know, necker that you can wrap around the neck of the bottle with your name and the date that you registered the bottle with Jack Daniel's.
Okay.
My dad owned a bar when I was a kid, by the way. He had so many of those bottles that we had a bar in our home with a shelf like this running around the upper room. And it was totally filled with these bottles. And the eventuality is that he registered so many bottles with Jack Daniel's that they sent him the deed to 1 square foot of land on the Jack Daniel's distillery property, making him, in fact, a Tennessee squire because he's a landowner. He's passed away.
That's amazing.
And then the best part of the story to me is yearly there was a group of hunters who would go coon hunting on the property of Jack Daniel's, and they would write him a letter inviting him to join them. And he would write back and say, "No, thanks, guys." And then they would send him a photo of all the raccoons laid out and all the hunters standing there with their rifles every year. And we had several of those framed on the wall in our home bar. So quite familiar with the Jack Daniel's brand.
All right.
Close friends call him John.
Excellent. And you would know.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
So stoked to taste this and have one that's nearly as old as me.
All right. Yeah. That is pretty exciting. Well, we can just dive in, I think, and crack it open. This one opened easily. I've had some.
Sure, that's thick, I'm sure. Pretty high level of liquid in there, so not a lot of evaporation has happened over this time, so that means there's a good seal. Oh, hello. It smells thin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of nose at all. It's coming up a little bit now.
Yeah, a little, but it's mostly Yeah,
I don't know if it's like wine; it gets like tight sitting in its little bottle.
Yeah. Are we going in, or are we just?
Sure, you can go in. Yeah, I'm not getting a lot to talk about on the nose.
It feels like, well, the proof is there still,
Yeah,
but it feels like a shell of Jack Daniels.
interesting. And I'm not super familiar with Jack Daniels as a brand. It wasn't something I had like any
It's
associations with.
it's nice and warm, as you mentioned,
Absolutely.
45%, so 90 proof. I can feel it going all the way down, but like it's not got those. It doesn't. It's not holding on to the qualities that make Jack
Mhm.
Daniels Tennessee whiskey. Jack Daniels Tennessee whiskey.
It has an interesting finish. I'm getting like a lot of like caramely notes
Certainly,
on the finish.
some caramel, even some like cherry wood.
Yes, that's yeah. There's
Yeah,
something there which I didn't notice at all when I tasted it, but now that I'm sitting with it, I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah. I think as with
You can smell that cherry wood on the nose.
sure,
Yeah.
as with all the things that I taste, we can't make a snap judgment on anything. Even here at the bar, we have a rule where
Right.
anytime we get something new on the bar, we get there's only a small team here at Amor y Amargo. We get 4 bottles of it, and we don't display it,
Yes.
and we keep it on the back bar with a notebook beside it, and we as a group taste through all 4 bottles
It's
and
amazing.
write our notes because we're not here at the same time, so we are sharing our
Yeah.
notes. It's like an open document, but it's a literal physical notebook. Um, and until we've gone through 4 bottles, we don't put it on the back bar because as soon as we put it on the back bar, the first day you put something on the 10 people walk in, they scan that bar, hundreds of bottles, and they
They've
spot that one.
memorized the back bar and they
But
never
if we don't
taste
know
it.
it, then we look foolish, right? So we're never going to make ourselves look foolish. So I always say, if you've never can't make chicken soup if you haven't eaten chicken,
Right.
right? So we eat some chicken first, then we decide what we can do with it. That way, when people come in and say, "Can you make me something with that?" we can talk about it on its own, and we can make something using it. So anyway, I'm not going to make a snap judgment on this, but it does taste thin.
Yeah.
The aroma is coming around a little bit as
Up a little
this is
bit.
warming up in our hands, probably.
Yeah. But yeah, it's
But
not a lot of there.
yeah, not a lot of there on the nose, and then on the palate, it feels like it's mostly just the ethanol. Like
Yeah.
it's warming. It's not offensive by any means. If someone had a full bottle of this on their back bar,
Sure.
you might say it's a special thing to taste through time a little bit, but
Right. Or it'd be fine in Coke. Right.
which is how my dad took it.
I bet he did. Do we know anything about where Jack Daniels was in the early 80s? I mean, that like the 70s and 80s, of course, were not a great time for American whiskey.
They weren't. That's true. So they probably, I bet it was a lot of export.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we were doing with American whiskey back then, is getting it out of the country because no one here wanted it.
Somebody else elsewhere might want it.
Yeah, nobody wanted it here. This is obviously well pre the bourbon and rye boom that we're still kind of in the midst of. Look at you like a pro reaching for glasses. So we're gonna taste this one. Now we can do it side by side. Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know what their production changes might have been since then to now. I'm sure that their mash bill has remained largely the same, but you have to assume that I think you added it to your other one. No,
Nope.
you didn't. Okay.
Nope.
I would assume their mash bill remains the same because that's their stock and trade. But those grains could have changed, right?
Yeah.
So
right. And that's something we don't think about, right? Agriculture has changed so much in that
sure.
time period.
So I'm lucky enough that I've gotten to taste a lot of old whiskeys, and that's what we talk about the most. Is that
That's interesting.
the grain, the mash bill, the recipe is the same. X number of this grain, percentage wise of this grain, percentage wise of that grain, but the grains themselves have changed over time.
Sure.
So that's
that
what
makes
changes.
A lot of sense. I know you're an old Overholt fan.
That's what I was referring to. I don't want to queer the deal on the day, but
I'm hoping, cross my fingers. I'm hoping we'll get an old Overholt so I can have you back.
Circle back to me. That'd be amazing. I bought for your audience here. I bought a case. I always say this story.
I love this story.
This story is boring. With each sentence, it gets more exciting. I bought a case of old Overholt rye whiskey.
Like you do.
I bought it from the auction house at Sotheby's.
Most people don't do that.
It was from 1909.
Yeah.
It cost me more than a year's rent for 12 bottles of whiskey.
And you drank all of them.
They're gone. Yes.
That's amazing.
I redefined alcoholism. It's not about how much you drink. It's about how much you spend.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, my grandma never drank any of these, right?
Total collection,
my
right?
Grandfather might have snuck a nip here or there, and she was she'd have been appalled. But yeah, she collected spoons, she collected bells, she collected bottles. She was a collector. And so my aunt, and my dad are like, will Grandma be happy about this or sad in her grave? Is she rolling over or appreciating it?
I would have to think that, someone getting enjoyment out of the collection that she created is enjoyment. And then once you've made your collection and passed it on to someone else, it's up to them to enjoy it in their way. So this is your way of enjoying it, and not only are you enjoying it, you're sharing it with people. So I think you should be stoked.
And that is it for me, right? Because like I think a bottle's destiny is to be drunk.
Of course.
Right? Like there's nothing sadder than a bottle of booze and like a bottle of fine wine that nobody drinks until it's over the hill. Like that's a sad day.
That case of whiskey that I got, there's part of me that's sort of infuriated that someone didn't drink it in 1909 when it was made and meant to be drank. And then of course there's a part of me that feels lucky that I got to experience it.
Right.
But that there is that part of me that says, why didn't this get consumed when it was meant to be consumed?
At least it's spirits though, not like wine, so it's not gonna go over the hill,
right?
In quite the same way.
In quite the same way. So the comparison here is very clear, right? The newer stuff doesn't have the burn because it's lower proof. It's also it's got a much more poppy aroma. It's got a
lot more flavor in the new.
Lot more caramel happening. You know, it's the Lincoln County process, which is charcoal filtered whiskey, which makes it Tennessee whiskey. It's all evident and clear in sample number 2.
I mean, they're both really light tasting whiskeys compared to, a bourbon or something. And that's the Jack Daniel's promise, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I always balk at the word smooth when we talk about any liquid. They're all the same liquid. They're pretty smooth, right? They're liquid. But yeah, the whole the Lincoln County process, which I just mentioned, which is the charcoal filtering that makes Jack Daniel's so famous, and other whiskeys from Tennessee do that as well. George Dickel's charcoal filtered as well. That's what gives that softness, that ease of drinking. Yeah. Which is a goal in whiskey in general, right?
Yes.
When whiskey comes off the still, it is clear like water. It is high in proof, and it is rough around the edges. We park it in a barrel for a minimum of 2 years to be considered straight bourbon or rye. We go longer than that. We bond it. 10 years, things like that. The barrel is sort of rounding off those edges, right?
Right.
And then the final process that these guys use with the charcoal, that's even more smooth. That's high polish, right?
Yes.
So we took a steak knife and we filed off its teeth and made it into a butter knife, and then we shined it up really nice. Which is a good quality. That's the goal of this whiskey, and that's what makes it such an easy drinker, and it's what makes it so popular around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely, like, I don't know, this old bottle very much just alcohol, especially side by side.
Yeah. When we tasted it first, it gave some hints of itself, but when you taste them side by side, it loses the race entirely.
Absolutely. And if you look at the color, right, it's much lighter in color than this one. So we don't know anything about aging time on these, then versus now. So I don't know.
I would have to assume again the same, right? They're the Jack Daniel's 4-year aged.
Okay.
To be bourbon. It's bourbon in the first place. It becomes Tennessee whiskey.
Don't tell them that. They don't like it when you say.
I know. But I would imagine they wouldn't have changed any of that.
Okay.
Again, the grains have changed, and time simply hasn't been kind to this particular miniature bottle. Yeah. Now, what is your common result? Is this common? The old one is a shadow of the current day, or
the spirits I've tasted so far. I've tasted a lot of liqueurs because I think those bottles looked interesting.
I bet.
Right. So
as
there's
a collector,
been a lot of liqueurs and things in there. So those have been of varied quality. But of the spirits, I tasted 2 scotches. One was amazing and better than its modern day counterpart. And the other one was It was kind of like this. It was, not a lot going on. And then with the bourbons, American whiskeys, this is the second one that I've tasted. And it definitely, the first one was the Wild Turkey 101. And that was much richer in the old version. And this is not holding up. So I guess we're at 50-50 so far.
All right.
Not bad.
I mean, the adventure continues, right?
It does.
I think super happy to be involved, and I thank you for inviting me.
Really happy to have you here. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me.
And that walk down memory lane for me.
Absolutely. I had no idea.
It's crazy.
Amazing.
You collected these things from your grandmother. I have no clue where those bottles went that my dad had.
Oh, really?
And there were at least, 200 of them.
That's wild.
So with the gold necker, I'm sure I could have melted them down and made a nice necklace.
16 karat gold. In the mini community, it's really interesting. There's all these Facebook groups, there's websites, there's tons of people who collect these bottles, but they tended to be from my grandma's generation. And so as they die off, their kids and their grandkids are like, what do I do with these things? And so they're online trying to sell them. And so the mini collector groups are all about buying and trading and selling. But I want to know about the bottle, right? I want to know the history.
Sure.
There's a website devoted to documenting every mini they can get their hands on, but they don't like attach a date or any data to them, and it drives me crazy.
Right.
When? Just tell me when that's from. So
Right.
I love the American bottles that have the date right on the bottom of the glass.
Yeah. Well, this has been great fun. I appreciate it.
This has been great. Where can people find you?
I am Creative Drunk on all social media. That's the easiest way to get me.
Absolutely.
Instagram, Facebook.
That's how I got him.
Yeah, all of it. And then, of course, you can find me here at Amor y Amargo quite often. And then my show, The Speakeasy, on Heritage Radio Network. We've been on for 12 years as a weekly podcast.
Just won the Spirited Award for Best Podcast, to your chagrin, really.
I'll take it. I'm glad we won it. But the running joke was that we were nominated for and top 4 of the nominations every year that the category for Best Podcast, Broadcast, or Video Series existed. So we were doing this Susan Lucci situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, Susan Lucci made the news every year. She didn't win.
And that's what I was like, we're on the board every year, guys. We don't need to win. We need to stay in the conversation. Because once we've won, now we can't even be nominated for 5 more years. And is the Speakeasy going to be on for 17 years? I mean, I hope so, but
I hope so.
You never know.
You guys have a lot to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can find me at mytinybottles.com and at mytinybottles on all your social media. Check out the episode about this bottle. There's more bottles up there, so look for that. Thank you so much for having us. Cheers.
Cheers to you. I'm going to take the last of the old one.
All right.